come to the final two sayings. Look at him. Listen to him. How is he instructing us? Look at love manifested, poured out right in front of us. Minister Joy is going to come with the sixth saying, it is finished. Minister Monet will come with the seventh saying, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. Listen to him as he speaks again.
How's everyone this evening? I do greet everyone this evening. I'm not going to be before you long. I know we have clergy amongst us, but I really do mean it. I give honor to Bishop, Pastor Frida, Pastor Lady Hatchett, Pastors Maurice and Stacy Bryceman, Pastor Matthews. Thank you for your introduction. And I applaud everyone else for taking the time out to come out this evening. I pray that you've been blessed by the words that have been shared so far. And I hope and pray that your minds and hearts shall remain open and tuned to what the Lord has to say. You know, the saying that I'll discuss this evening is, it is finished. Minister Antonio did such a wonderful job with I thirst, so if you'll give me a moment, I'm just going to take some time to fuse I thirst with it is finished. If you choose to follow along, I'll be reading from the Gospel according to John, chapter 19, verses 29 through 30. And I'll be coming from the King James Version. And this picks up right after Jesus says, I thirst. Verse 29 reads, Now there was set a vessel full of vinegar, and they filled a sponge with vinegar and put it upon hyssop, and put it to his mouth. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, It is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. Now while I was preparing to speak this evening, I read the scripture repeatedly. And yes, the saying of Jesus is important. But first we're going to look at the action of Jesus right before he said, It is finished. The action that I'm specifically referring to is in verse 30, where Jesus receiving the vinegar. Now, by this time, Jesus has been beaten, he's been persecuted, spit upon. He has nails in his hands and feet, and he has thorns on his head. And after enduring all of that, he's now being offered vinegar to drink as an additional form of mockery and cruelty. Now, we know the motive of the people was to torture and torment Jesus. So I said, God, what was your purpose for Jesus receiving the vinegar right before he said, It is finished? So I prayed and I began to research vinegar. Now, through my research, I learned that vinegar is an acid, and it has a sharp, bitter, and sour taste to it. Now, if we use vinegar today, we may mix it with water and use it as a cleaning product in our homes, or we may mix it with oil and spices and use it as salad dressing. Now, back during that time, vinegar was mainly used as a condiment, as shown in the book of Ruth, when Boaz told Ruth to dip her bread in the vinegar. Then I went to the book of Psalm, where David had prophesied that Jesus would be given vinegar to drink. Now, when they gave him the vinegar on the cross, they didn't mix it with water or oil to cut the bitterness or the sourness. And they didn't give him a piece of bread to minimize the pungent taste. So I asked God again, why did Jesus have to receive the vinegar in its rawness before declaring the work of the Father finished? And the revelation that I received is the vinegar represents the bitterness or the sourness that surfaces within us when we don't want to do what God has called us to do. I was reminded of when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane and his soul was crushed with grief to the point of death. And he said, My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. The will of the Father was done through Jesus, but Jesus had a taste of bitterness in what he was called to do. Now, some of us can relate to the bitterness that Jesus experienced. Now, I don't know about you, but I definitely don't want to do everything that God is calling me to do. But we obey because we know that obedience is better than sacrifice. However, in our obedience, we may mumble and grumble internally, and we'll kick up imaginary dust, and we may clench our teeth and smile and try to act like we want to do it, but in the back of our minds, we're actually trying to think of, is it over yet? So we do what God has called us to do because we don't want to be like Jonah, who was in disobedience and therefore caused destruction to the people around him and ended up in the belly of a fish. Still, in our obedience, we get a sour taste in our mouths because we really don't want to obey. So we try to unhear what we know we've heard. Or maybe it's just me where we may try to cover up our spirits because we don't want God to drop anything in there and risk the opportunity or the chance of him giving us something that we don't want to do. I haven't figured that out yet. And while we're going through all of those changes, in the back of our minds we say, God, I should want to do what you have called me to do because you saved my life more times than I can remember. And I should want to do what you've called me to do because you've healed my heart when no one else could, when it was broken. And I should want to do what you've called me to do because when the enemy came in like a flood and attacked my mind and told me I was going crazy, you're the only one who could lift up a standard against him. Even with all of that, we still have the sour taste in our mouths about what you're calling us to do. So God, we ask that you crucify the bitterness and the sourness in us now, just as you did on the cross. God, we thank you for your mercy. It is because of your mercy that we are not consumed. God, your compassion never fails. They are new every morning. We were born into sin and shaped in iniquity, but when we accepted you into our lives, God, we were born again and made new. All things are passed away and all things become new. So God, as I close, help us to better identify with being new in you. Thank you.
Can we just give God some praise? Thank you, God. I give honor to our Bishop Joel Anderson, and our Pastor Frida Anderson. Woo, woo, woo. I give honor to Pastor Corey Hatchett and Lady Tanya Hatchett. Come on, let's celebrate them. As well as Pastors Dr. Maurice Bryson Sr. and Dr. Stacy Bryson and Pastor Matthew. Thank you. God bless you. God is awesome. Wow. Awesome words that went before us. But I'm here on assignment today to with the seventh saying, and it is, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. From the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23 and verse 46. I'm actually going to start at verse 44, King James Version. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was a darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. 46. And when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. God, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Oh God, my strength and my redeemer. In Jesus' name. The timing, as we've stated over and over again tonight, is a time after taking such a horrific journey, hot, muggy sweat pouring down his face and body in a low and dishonorable state while bearing the cross, positioned between two criminals, one to the left, one to the right, nails in his hands and in his flesh, with his flesh exposed. They have already torn his garments and him into pieces, and we've witnessed the soldiers gamble away his clothes. They've mocked him in his messiahship. Who is he? They've even fastened a sign to the cross above him saying, "This is the King of the Jews." He is suffering and in pain, taking on the sins of all the world and enduring the pain. It is now the 6th hour, and it was dark over all the earth. In my studies, I wanted to know the 6th hour, around about what time that was, and that was between, I believe, 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. And then the other half of the scripture before, the veil of the temple was torn. And I said, so what is the significance in the veil being torn? And so, first of all, what was the veil? It was a curtain or veil was hung over the entrance as a screen. It was that veil that was miraculously torn at the moment that the Messiah's sacrifice for humanity was complete. It was complete. So, the significance, as was stated before in some of the words that came, is that the priest would usually go into the outer tent religiously to perform the rituals and the duties. Only the high priest could go into the holy place to atone the sins of the people with a blood sacrifice. But at this time, God's blood, his sacrifice on the cross, came and it atoned our sins. And as I was studying, I came across something that says, but when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy place. It was the Messiah's sacrifice that opened the way to God. So now to the scripture. Now Jesus, back to the statement, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. Now the word commend, it means to entrust. It means to, excuse me, y'all, I have a lot of things that I have written out here. But commend means to entrust someone or something, to commit it too. So he commended his spirit unto God, to the Father. And then again, having said this, he gave up the ghost. So I have 3 points. My first is that he was aware of the time, the times, and the timing. He recognized the time that he was in, the times and the timing, and he knew that he was on assignment. 2, again, he commended, he entrusted himself unto the Father. I have a question. What is keeping you from committing and entrusting your life fully to the Father? Thirdly, there was an act of surrender, a release, an unleashing, a let going, and relinquishing of his rights to life, to live. On the cross, from the beginning to the ending, God endured a lot. But because of his awareness of the time, the times, and the timing he was in, he did not forfeit the plan, purpose, and the mission on his life and what he had to accomplish. He did not get sidetracked by the other individuals on the cross, the thieves on his left and on his right. He did not begin to compare himself to them. Rather, he stayed on assignment. Instead of thinking that life was happening to him, he stayed focused because life was actually happening through him. His mission, his purpose in this particular moment in time, he did not get sidetracked by his mother, the disciples, and the other people that was following him that perhaps did not want him to depart, didn't want him to leave. But he had, that was a smaller picture. But he knew that there was a bigger picture, and he was here to save humanity. Those who were coming after and behind him. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about big or small. Will you answer the call? He did not get sidetracked by the leaders, the kings, Pilate and Herod, scribes and priests, the soldiers and people who were crucifying him. See, we have a lot of people in our lives who may be talking about us in spaces and places that are talking about us, saying stuff, the small stuff about us. But will you allow that to stop you from fulfilling the plan that God has on your life, even before the very foundation of the world? See, we are here for his glory. And if we're doing anything else outside of doing this job, which is to ensure that his glory, the glory is directed back to him through our daily living, then we are not on assignment. See, we're not here just to go to work, go to trainings, and show up in church every Sunday and get all this information in us. And going through the motions and the cycles of life and getting without giving. But we are here for service, to surrender our lives. See, that is what God was doing on the cross. He was here rendering his life unto the service, mission, plan, and purpose he was here for. So again, my question today for you is big or small? He wasn't sidetracked because of the small things, but he knew that his mission was bigger. So do you stay in your small or do you launch out into the big, in the deep, that place that God has already positioned and postured for you? Many times we're holding on to little things in our lives, relationships, holding on because that's all we've ever known or been exposed to. We do what we do until, or what we know, until there's a shift in our mindset, in our perspective to do something greater. So today I'm here to give you a shake-up, an implosion, a disruption of your mindset. Perhaps you're even saying now, no, I'm not thinking small. I think I'm all right. So my question again is, why haven't you fully walked into that thing, the call that God has placed on your life? Why haven't you at least started to put things together? What's keeping you bound? What's keeping you stuck? Not moving forward to the things that God is calling you to. And we all know what those things are. See, it's not until we make that step, that move into the right direction, that we begin to see things unfold in our lives. And even then, sometimes, I'm here to tell you that everything still might not unfold the way that you intended it to. But I can assure you that you will be in alignment with God and the one who has all the answers for your life. Like Jesus, some people want to keep us bound to our age, our appearance. They might take us for a joke. But I'm here to tell you to stay on your mission. You cannot waste time trying to explain who you are and your mission to these individuals. But at the appointed time, space, and season, it will all be revealed. It's not your job to reveal these things to them. Today, I ask you again, big or small? Will you stay in the smallness, that place that there's no room for you to move in? It might be suffocating, while God is offering you bigger. He's dangling the keys in front of you, saying, come, my daughter, come, my son, lay it all down, take up your cross, and commend